He thought she died in the sand and smoke of war. Now, she was pouring his coffee, her scarred arm hiding a tattoo that screamed a secret only a soldier could read. A ghost from his past was alive. The Beacon Diner hummed with a life of its own, a low-frequency buzz of sizzling bacon, clinking ceramic, and the melancholic blue notes of a forgotten song drifting from an old jukebox. It smelled of burnt coffee, sugar, and the faint, metallic tang of regret left behind by patrons who'd stared too long into the bottom of their cups. In the heart of this morning symphony was Raina Jefferson. At 38, she moved with an economy of motion that was less about efficiency and more about control. Every gesture was precise, deliberate. The way she wiped a counter, a clean sweep from left to right. The way she poured coffee, a steady stream that never trembled. The way she held her breath. She wore the diner's uniform, a crisp white shirt with sleeves rolled to the wrist, a black apron tied tight. But her true uniform was the one etched into her skin. From her knuckles, a roadmap of fire climbed her arms, a tortured landscape of slick, smooth keloids and tight, puckered tissue, disappearing beneath the starched white fabric. It was the first thing people saw, the thing they tried not to see, the thing they always whispered about. Tuesday was their day. Preston Cole and Finn Carter, founders of some predatory, growth strategy firm, always claimed Booth 7. Preston, with his too perfect hair and a watch worth more than the diner's monthly profit, led the charge. Finn, his sycophantic shadow, provided the laugh track. "Well, look what the fire dragged in," Preston boomed, his voice a weapon designed for public spaces. He slammed a fist on the table, making the silverware dance. "Freddy Krueger's decided to grace us with her presence." Finn chortled, a wet, unpleasant sound. A few heads turned. The regulars sighed into their coffee. "More coffee, sweetheart," Preston sneered, waving his empty mug. "And try not to melt the handle this time." Raina arrived at their booth, a fresh pot in hand. Her face was a mask of placid neutrality. She'd learned long ago that reacting was giving them fuel. Silence was her shield. She began to pour, the dark liquid hitting the bottom of Preston's cup without a single stray drop. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said, her voice even, low. "Black, no sugar." Preston's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. Her memory, her refusal to be rattled, always pricked his ego. "She remembers," Finn chuckled nervously. "Got a fireproof memory." Raina moved to Finn's cup, then the other two men at the booth, junior associates who laughed with less conviction, their eyes darting around nervously. This was their ritual. Public humiliation served with a side of pancakes. Across the diner, tucked into a corner booth by the window, Leo Vance watched. He was road-weary, the dust of a 3-week security contract still clinging to the lines around his eyes. He'd seen men like Preston before, men who confused cruelty with strength, who built their empires on the backs of people they deemed lesser. He watched them taunt the black waitress, his jaw tightening with each jeering remark. He saw her stoicism, the rigid control in her posture, and recognized it. It was the same armor soldiers wore, a defense mechanism against a world that didn't understand their war. He almost looked away, disgusted, when she turned to grab a dropped napkin from the floor. The movement was slight, but it was enough. Her left sleeve, usually buttoned securely at the wrist, slid up by a single, critical inch. The light from the window caught the skin on her forearm. Leo saw the scars, of course, a chaotic tapestry of melted wax and tough, scarred leather. He'd seen burns before in the sandbox. But it was what lay beneath them, what the fire hadn't completely erased, that made the air leave his lungs. It was ink. Faded, warped by the scar tissue, but unmistakable. The top curve of a wing, the hint of a flame. It was a tattoo of a phoenix, the mythical bird of rebirth. And intertwined with its talons, he could just make out the ghost of a number and 3 letters, 7th MED. Leo's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, desperate drumbeat. He stared, not at a waitress, but at a ghost. He knew that tattoo. He knew it like he knew the weight of his own rifle. He'd seen it on the arm of the best damn combat medic in the 7th Medical Battalion, a woman who ran into hell to pull wounded Marines from burning Humvees. A woman they called KJ. A woman who had been declared killed in action a decade ago in Fallujah. "Tell me, Raina," Preston's voice cut through Leo's shock, oblivious. "Did you have a little kitchen mishap? Maybe get into an argument with a deep fryer?" More laughter. But Leo didn't hear it. He was seeing smoke and blood and hearing the echoing silence after the IED blast. There was no body. Just a name carved onto a memorial wall. KJ. And now she was here, pouring coffee, enduring the casual cruelty of a man who wouldn't last 5 seconds in the world she had survived. His ghost was alive. And as he watched her turn back to the counter, her shoulders squared, her stance perfectly balanced, Leo Vance knew his own war wasn't over. It had just walked back into his life. The diner's hum seemed to fade into a distant roar in Leo's ears. Every instinct, honed over years in force recon, screamed at him. He pushed his half-eaten breakfast aside, his focus zeroed in on the woman behind the counter. He had to be sure. He had to know. He rose from his booth and approached her, his steps measured. "Ma'am," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable weight of command. Raina turned, her eyes lifting to meet his. They were dark, guarded, and held a weariness that had nothing to do with a long shift. For a split second, as their gazes locked, he saw a flicker of something else. Recognition? No, more like assessment. The way a soldier sizes up a potential threat. "Can I help you with something, sir?" she asked, her tone impeccably professional, yet underlined with a cold, clear boundary. He had to push. "I was with the 1st Marine Division," he said, keeping his voice low so only she could hear. "Attached to the big red one in Fallujah. We had a medic with us. Call sign KJ. She pulled my entire fire team out of a hot LZ after our vehicle was hit." Raina's composure didn't break, but the air around her grew colder. A stillness settled over her, so profound it was almost a physical force. Her hands, which were wiping down the steel counter, stopped. "I'm sorry, sir. I think you have me confused with someone else." She had a tattoo, Leo pressed, his eyes fixed on her left arm. A phoenix. 7th MED. She was declared Kia after a secondary IED took out the triage tent. Raina's jaw was a hard, tight line. That was a long time ago. It wasn't a confirmation, but it wasn't a denial either. It was a wall. Before Leo could say another word, a violent commotion erupted from a booth across the diner. A man, middle-aged and red-faced, was on his feet, clawing at his throat. His wife screamed his name, her eyes wide with panic. "He's choking. Somebody help." Chaos bloomed. Patrons froze, others jumped up uselessly. Preston Cole and his crew stared, a mixture of morbid curiosity and annoyance on their faces. But Raina had already moved. In the space of a heartbeat, the quiet, scarred waitress was gone. In her place stood a combat medic. She covered the 10 feet to the man's table in 2 fluid strides. "Sir, can you breathe?" she commanded, her voice cutting through the panic. The man shook his head, his face turning a terrifying shade of purple. "I'm performing the Heimlich maneuver," she announced loudly, "for liability, for control." Her arms slid around his torso from behind, scarred hands locking into a perfect fist enclasp just above his navel. She didn't hesitate. 1, 2, powerful, upward thrusts into his diaphragm. On the third, a large, poorly chewed piece of steak shot from the man's mouth, landing on the linoleum floor with a wet smack. The man gasped, drawing in a ragged, life-saving breath before sagging into the booth, weak with relief. A wave of applause and stunned murmurs rippled through the diner. Raina stepped back, her 2 fingers already on the man's carotid artery, checking his pulse. "You're okay," she said gently, her voice now calm and reassuring. "Breathe slowly." The man's wife clutched Raina's arm, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, oh my God, thank you." Raina simply nodded once, her duty done. She straightened up and turned, her gaze sweeping the room. Preston and Finn were silent, their phones down, their usual sneers replaced by slack-jawed astonishment. The power dynamic in the room had been irrevocably altered. She wasn't just the burnt waitress anymore. She was a lifesaver. She caught Leo's eye. He gave her a slow, deliberate nod. "Textbook," his expression said. "Perfect form." She walked away, heading for the swinging doors to the kitchen. Leo intercepted her at the back exit alley a few minutes later, the grimy space smelling of stale grease and damp brick. "That was KJ's work," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Raina leaned against the brick wall, the fight finally draining from her eyes, replaced by a profound exhaustion. She pushed up her sleeves, revealing the scarred arms and the phoenix tattoo in the harsh sunlight. "The phoenix never flies alone," Leo said softly, reciting the unofficial motto of their mixed service unit. A tear, the first sign of a crack in her armor, traced a path through the dust on her cheek. Her voice was a whisper, a ghost of a sound. "I thought KJ died in that fire." "So did I," Leo said, his own voice thick with emotion. "So did we all." The back alley of the Beacon Diner became a confessional, the rusted dumpster and cracked brick walls serving as silent witnesses. The truth, held back for a decade, finally spilled out of Raina, not in a torrent, but in a slow, controlled narrative, as if she were delivering a field report. "The explosion, it took everything," she began, her gaze fixed on a distant point beyond the alley. "The fire flash vaporized my dog tags, my ID, everything in my pockets. When they pulled me from the wreckage, I was just another charred body, alive but unidentifiable." She recounted weeks of silence in a German hospital, her throat too damaged by smoke inhalation to speak. By the time she could, she was a Jane Doe, lost in the vast, impersonal machinery of military bureaucracy. Her memory was fractured, her records gone. When the VA system finally processed her, they saw a woman with no service file, no rank, no proof of her existence as a soldier. She was just another faceless veteran with severe trauma and no benefits. "You could have reached out," Leo said, his voice tight with a mixture of anger and regret. "To the unit, to me." Raina let out a dry, humorless laugh. "And say what?" "Hi, it's me, KJ, the ghost. I don't have papers, I don't have proof, but trust me. They would have thought it was a cruel joke or a scam. To the system, I was dead. In a way, it was easier to stay that way. Being a ghost is better than being a liar." Leo's jaw clenched. He understood the brutal logic of it. He'd seen the system chew up and spit out heroes with full documentation, a ghost stood no chance. He told her about his own life after the Marines, how he'd grown disillusioned with the lack of support for veterans who fell through the cracks. It's why he started his nonprofit, a small, scrappy organization dedicated to helping those invisible vets navigate the system, find resources, and reclaim their identities. "You're not alone in this, Raina," he said, his voice softening. "Not anymore." It was then that Raina's expression shifted. The victim faded, and the strategist emerged. "I know," she said, a new sharpness in her eyes. "And I haven't been just enduring." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Preston Cole thinks I'm just a broken toy for him to kick around. He and his partners, they hold court in that booth every Tuesday. They talk business. They brag. They don't filter anything because they think the burnt black waitress is too stupid or too traumatized to understand." She tapped the pocket of her apron. "For the last 6 months, I've been recording them. I have hours of audio. Every slur, every discriminatory joke, Every detailed conversation about how they restructure companies by illegally targeting minorities, older workers, and other veterans for termination, all while using coded language to avoid lawsuits. I have client names, dates, specific cases. Leo stared at her, stunned. He had come here thinking he needed to save a fallen soldier. He was wrong. He was looking at a soldier who had been patiently gathering intelligence from behind enemy lines, waiting for the right moment to strike. She wasn't a victim waiting for rescue, she was a sniper waiting for a spotter. I was just missing two things, Raina continued, her eyes gleaming with fierce intelligence. A credible delivery system and reliable fire support. A slow smile spread across Leo's face. He finally understood. I think I can help with that, he said. He told her about Maya Singh, a fearless investigative journalist he knew from his contracting days. She owed him a favor, and she specialized in blowing the lid off corporate malfeasance. She was their delivery system. And my organization? Leo added. We have lawyers. We have contacts in every major veteran advocacy group in the country. We'll be your fire support. In the grimy alley, surrounded by the ghosts of their shared past, a new alliance was forged. It wasn't built on pity or nostalgia, but on a foundation of scars, strategy, and a burning, unyielding demand for justice. The campaign was about to begin. The following Tuesday, the Beacon Diner felt different. The air was thick with unspoken tension, a calm before a meticulously planned storm. Raina moved through her morning routine with the same serene control, but today, it was the poise of a hunter, not prey. In her apron pocket, her phone was set to record. Across the city, Leo Vance was on a conference call, coordinating with their legal support and priming advocacy groups to be ready. At 9:15 a.m., Maya Singh walked in. She was sharp, dressed in a simple but professional blazer, carrying a notebook and a phone. She looked like any other customer, taking a small table near the front with a clear view of booth 7. She ordered black coffee. When Raina poured it, their eyes met for a single, charged second. A silent nod passed between them. The trap was set. Preston Cole and his entourage arrived, louder and more arrogant than ever. Tuesday's here, so is the tragedy. Preston announced. He launched into a tirade about a recent acquisition, bragging about how they were going to trim the fat. Raina approached the table to refill their water. That sounds complicated, she said, her voice a perfect blend of feigned ignorance and curiosity. It was the only bait Preston needed. It's an art, sweetheart, he gloated, leaning back. You can't just fire people for being old or, low energy. You have to build a case. Document cultural non-fits, cite synergy gaps. It's about creating a narrative where they fire themselves. Finn Carter snickered. He's a genius. Last month, we streamlined a tech firm. Got rid of their entire legacy diversity department. Called it optimizing for a more cohesive, forward-facing team culture. Every word was a nail in their own coffin, captured in high-fidelity audio from two different angles. At her table, Maya's fingers flew across her phone's screen, transcribing key quotes, uploading audio clips to a secure server, and adding them to the explosive article she had prepared. At exactly 10:03 a.m., Leo gave her the signal. Maya hit publish. The effect was instantaneous and digital. A multi-platform exposé, complete with embedded audio evidence and leaked internal emails from another anonymous source Maya had cultivated, went live. The headline was devastating: Growth Strategy, Firm Langdon and Cole Exposed, Recordings Reveal Systemic Discrimination and Illegal Practices. A moment later, phones around the diner began to buzz. One of the junior associates at Preston's table glanced at his screen, and the color drained from his face. Preston, we're trending. Preston laughed. About time the world recognized my brilliance. No, the associate whispered, his voice trembling. It's bad. Finn grabbed his phone, his jaw dropping as he read. Simultaneously, Preston's phone began to ring, an angry client's name flashing on the screen. He stood up, furious and confused, and stepped outside to take the call. That's when the second phase of the attack began. An older man in a wheelchair, wearing a faded Marine Corps cap, slowly rolled toward the now empty head of Booth 7. He stopped, looked at the remaining stunned associates, and then looked toward Raina. He didn't speak. He simply raised a trembling hand to his forehead in a slow, perfect salute. A moment later, another veteran, a woman with a prosthetic leg, stood up from a different table and did the same. Then another, and another. A silent legion, a dozen strong, who had answered Leo's call to be there, rose to their feet. They formed a quiet, powerful phalanx, their eyes fixed on Preston's cronies. They were a living, breathing honor wall, a testament to the soldier Preston had mocked. Preston stormed back inside, his face purple with rage. "What is this? What did you do?" he screamed at Raina. She faced him, her expression calm, her voice clear and steady. "I didn't do anything, Mr. Cole. I just stopped being silent." He looked around, finally seeing the circle of silent soldiers, the dozens of phone cameras pointed at him, the contempt on the faces of the regular patrons. There was no escape. He was trapped, not by walls, but by the weight of his own monstrous behavior, now laid bare for the world to see. He sputtered, speechless, before turning and fleeing the diner, a coward exposed in the harsh light of justice. The silent legion remained standing, a guard of honor for the ghost who had finally come home. The digital explosion of the takedown was only the beginning. The aftermath was a tempest of support and venom. Raina's story went viral, propelled by the hashtag #PhoenixWaitress. Donations poured into Leo's nonprofit. Messages of solidarity flooded the diner's voicemail. But fame's shadow is dark. The threat started within hours, vile, racist comments online, followed by anonymous calls to the diner. The escalation came on a Thursday night, just after closing. A brick shattered the front window of the Beacon Diner, a rock wrapped in a piece of paper tied to it with twine. The scrawled note was crude and hateful, "Go back to the ashes, Scarface. No one wants a monster hero." Arturo "Art" Rossi, the diner's gruff but fiercely protective owner, swept up the glass with a grim look on his face. "They're trying to scare you, kid," he said to Raina. Raina looked at the broken window, then at the hateful note. "They're not scaring me," she replied, her voice dangerously calm. "They're giving me more evidence." The community's response was immediate and overwhelming. The next morning, a local contractor showed up and replaced the window with reinforced polycarbonate glass, refusing payment. Veterans from Leo's network began taking informal security shifts, sitting in their cars outside or taking up booths inside, a quiet, watchful presence. The most powerful response, however, was artistic. A young street artist, herself a veteran, spent a full day painting a stunning mural on the brick wall of the building opposite the diner. It depicted a giant, fiery phoenix, its wings spread wide, sheltering the small, brightly lit diner beneath them. It became an instant landmark, a symbol of the community's defiance. Inside the diner, something equally transformative was happening. Inspired by the Silent Legion, Art cleared a section of the back wall. He called it the Honor Wall. Veterans began bringing in photos, some of themselves in uniform, others of friends who never made it home. They left dog tags, unit patches, folded flags. It became a living, breathing memorial, a place of pilgrimage. Official channels were moving too. The Department of Labor, armed with Raina's evidence, launched a full-scale federal investigation into Langdon and Cole. The state attorney general followed suit. Sponsors and clients abandoned the firm in droves, issuing public statements condemning their practices. Raina's life had been turned upside down. She was no longer just a waitress, she was a symbol. She received hundreds of emails and letters from people across the country, other veterans, burn survivors, victims of workplace harassment, who saw their own silent struggles reflected in her story. One letter, from a teenage girl, contained a simple, hand-drawn picture of a woman with scars on her arms, holding a coffee pot in one hand and a sword in the other. The caption read, "Some heroes serve in different ways." Raina pinned the drawing to the corkboard in the kitchen. She was at the center of a storm, a figurehead for a movement she never intended to start. The attacks hadn't stopped, but they were now drowned out by a rising chorus of support. The world had tried to make her invisible, to mock her scars into submission. Now, those scars were a banner, and under that banner, an army of the unseen was finally beginning to rise. The marble halls of Capitol Hill were a different kind of battlefield, one fought with procedure and veiled rhetoric. But Raina walked them with the same steady resolve she'd once navigated minefields. She was invited to testify before the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, not as a victim, but as an expert witness on the chasm between military service and civilian life. Dressed in a simple, dark blazer, sleeves rolled to her forearms, she sat before the panel of senators. She didn't read from a script. She spoke from her scars. "We are trained to endure, to be resilient, to complete the mission no matter the cost," she told them, her voice resonating in the quiet chamber. "But no one trains you for the silence that comes after. The silence of a system that loses your records. The silence of a society that thanks you for your service, then looks away from your wounds. I am here today to ask you to do one thing. Do not just see us when we are in uniform. See us, truly see us, when we are not." Her testimony was a quiet bombshell. It was replayed on every major news network, her words becoming a rallying cry. The fallout for Preston Cole was absolute. His company dissolved under the weight of lawsuits and public disgrace. Months later, he appeared at the diner, alone, stripped of his arrogance. He offered a clumsy, broken apology. Raina listened, her expression unreadable. "What you want, Mr. Cole, is absolution," she said, her voice devoid of anger. "I can't give you that. Only your own actions can." He nodded, defeated, and left. It was the last time she ever saw him. Her own actions were already building a new legacy. With Leo's partnership and the flood of donations, they co-founded a national nonprofit organization. They called it the Phoenix Project. Its mission was to provide legal, psychological, and vocational support for veterans struggling with the visible and invisible scars of service, helping them navigate the system that had failed Raina so profoundly. The Beacon Diner transformed. It was still a place for coffee and pancakes, but it was also the unofficial headquarters of the Phoenix Project. The honor wall now covered 2 entire walls, a sprawling, sacred tapestry of service and sacrifice. Art Rossi hired more veterans, and the diner became a sanctuary, a place of community and understanding. One evening, Raina stood outside, watching the neon sign of the diner cast a warm glow on the street. The mural of the phoenix across the way seemed to burn brightly in the twilight. She was no longer the ghost in the diner, counting breaths to survive the pain. She was the beacon. Her struggle, born in fire and forged in silence, had become a source of light for countless others. Her war hadn't ended, it had simply transformed into a mission. And it was a mission that would outlive her, a legacy not of what was lost in the fire, but of what was built from the ashes. The greatest stories are often not the loudest. They are hidden in plain sight, in the quiet dignity of a scarred waitress, in the silent courage of those who refuse to be erased. Raina's journey reminds us that there are heroes all around us, fighting battles we cannot see. What invisible heroes have you encountered in your own life? Share their stories in the comments below. Every story deserves to be heard. Please comment with respect for everyone's experience. And if you believe in the power of these stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content that reveals the strength hidden in the silence.